What's up, Sifters, and welcome to Ask Shane Anything, episode 127. I cannot believe I've done 127 of these things. Once you fall into the groove of just doing something every week, the episodes just fly on by. Some of you may not know this, but the reason I do this show is because back in the day when I just discovered the internet and was thinking about what I was going to do for my career, I stumbled across a little website called IGN64.com. There was a guy there named Matt Casamassina, who, in all honesty, inspired me to do what I'm doing today. I feel like IGN64 was the first modern video game website, and one thing that he did is he did a mailbag every day, where he would take questions from his viewers. I guess they were readers back then. There wasn't a lot of video on the internet, so from his readers. And I really thought it did a great job of adding context to the industry. I thought it was a great way for Matt to connect with his audience. I loved it. And I hope that you guys love this too. I hope that what we're doing with Ask Shane Anything is accomplishing a lot of the same goals that the IGN64 mailbag did way back in like 1996 or 97. It prompted me to start my own gaming website called Street Level Gaming in 1997, and I've been doing this ever since. So anyway, thanks to you guys who asked the questions for this. Without the questions, this just doesn't happen. And there are some of you guys who are really pitching in consistently, but we need other people to pitch in with questions to make this really happen. We got Thanksgiving coming up, we got the holidays coming up, and how that works is basically I create a bunch of episodes and I bank them, and then I schedule them so that they are published while I'm gone, so that you guys get content while I am back on the East Coast hanging out with family. So we need questions in order to do that. So if you want to ask Shane through Thanksgiving, you want it from like December 20th through like January 1st or whatever when I'm gone for the holidays, we need more questions. So go to SIFTD.net. In the header there's a link to go to our forums where you can click it and you can ask me some questions. And again, get off the sidelines. If you watch it, a lot of you guys watch the show, hardly any of you are asking questions. Get off the sidelines, ask some questions. Let's go. Okay, question number one comes from Khalib Twelai. Hey Shane, it's been several months since Sony required a PlayStation Network login to play its first-party exclusives on Steam. Even its single-player games like Ghost of Tsushima and God of War Ragnarok require it. Do you think this makes strategic sense for Sony despite the lost sales in over 100 countries? Okay, so what Khalib Twalai is talking about is basically PlayStation started releasing its exclusives that usually only stayed on PlayStation consoles on PC. This has been happening now for quite a while. And one of the things that PlayStation does is if you want to play one of its games on Steam, you have to create and log into a PlayStation Network account. Now, I would argue this is a bunch of people completely overblowing a situation, but Khalid Twalai's point is that beyond what the fans are freaking out about or what PC players are freaking out about, it's money. It's costing PlayStation money. And the reason he brought up over 100 countries or whatever is because they do not offer PlayStation Network to over 100 different countries, which means that the people in those countries cannot buy any of PlayStation games for PC. They wish they could, but they can't. So it is limiting the market. So what Khalid Twalai is asking is whatever the reasoning is for PlayStation doing this, and I'm going to go through that here in a minute, if it's worth the lost sales in over 100 different countries. Let's look at it. So first of all, PlayStation has very good reasons for why it is requiring a login. The biggest reason, and one that's really hard to refute, is that it has to do it for cross-play to work. So if you want to be able to play a game on PlayStation and then go over to PC and pick up where your save left off on your console, you can't do that unless you're logged into PSN. Now, some people would argue, well, Shane, that's kind of an apples and oranges comparison there because, like, most PC gamers don't care if their save works on a console because they play their games on PC. So I guess there's a little wiggle room there and back and forth, but that is something that PlayStation wants to have. It wants to make sure its PlayStation customers are protected and served if they go over to another platform to play those games. I think we can pretty much understand that, but there's other reasons too why this is the way PlayStation wants to do things. First of all, is content management. Sony can deliver its exclusive bonuses, all its DLC, updates and stuff like that to players on their PlayStation account, and then that transfers over to the PC game that they're playing. Community features like in-game messaging, friends list, party chat, all that kind of stuff. They want that to be accessible across all platforms. Then there's like the whole data angle of it, data analysis, security, and all that. Now I get it. It is kind of redundant. A lot of players feel like they have accounts on PC before, on Steam or Epic Games Store, and they think that making a separate PSN login is unnecessary. I guess I can kind of understand that, and other people are just paranoid about creating new accounts. We get that all the time. People are like, I don't want to go to Patreon to support you guys. And if you're one of those people, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, then go to donate.sifted.net, and you can just give us a one-time payment there with any credit card or PayPal in over 100 in some countries. I can understand the side of the PC player. I do think it's a little bit petty. But I think on the side of PlayStation, you can pretty much understand why it wants to do it this way. It's inelegant, and yes, it absolutely is hurting in sales numbers. But losing control of your content is hard to put a value on that. So my guess is PlayStation has done the cost-benefit analysis. It said, okay, these countries that we can't sell games to, they looked at the sales there, and they're like, well, typically, as far as physical sales are concerned, we sell X amount of copies of games there. And they figured out, or it's figured out, that the sales aren't big enough to keep them from kind of going against their protective policies around their content and their games and things like that. So I understand why the knee-jerk reaction is that sucks, but like in a lot of cases, once people really figure out the truth, I think people will understand why PlayStation is doing it that way. Okay, next up, we have a question from a first-time Ask Shane question asker, and that is Stevie. Do you think Nintendo missed out on adding post-launch content to Super Mario Odyssey? It was such a good overall game that I'm craving for more in that series. Well, Stevie, I think a lot of people agree with you. A lot of people really love Super Mario Odyssey. It sold very well. One of the Switch's best games, and one of the Switch's best-selling games. So I understand that. It is a little strange for you to be asking this so many years after the game released. But that's okay, because let's be honest, there hasn't been another 3D Mario game since. So I can understand why you're asking this question still, years later. Let's see, where would I start with this? The first thing I would say is that Nintendo doesn't exactly have a track record of releasing DLC for 3D Mario games. Now, to be fair, there haven't really been any 3D Mario games since DLC became a thing. Nintendo's managed to release a couple Zelda games, but only one 3D Mario game in that time span, which is a little interesting, and a little surprising, in all honesty, that we only got one 3D Mario game for the Switch. And I mean full 3D. Move in 360 degrees. You understand what I'm saying. That's crazy. Now, I will say this. I think one of the launch games for Switch 2 is going to be the next 3D Mario game, and I think it's also going to be Super Mario Odyssey 2. If you look at the history of Nintendo, what it does is it builds a 3D Mario game, and like all developers, when the game is done, there's always leftover content that you couldn't fit in there, or maybe you didn't have enough time to polish it up and make it game ready before the game launched. Nintendo in particular has tons of content like that. So if you go back to Super Mario Galaxy, the first Galaxy, which was absolutely incredible, and then we got Super Mario Galaxy 2. We never got like a Super Mario Sunshine 2. We never got a Super Mario 64 2, or people called it Super Mario 128 or whatever. Typically, you do not get sequels to 3D Mario games, but that was the exception because Nintendo's development team had a bunch of content left over ready for the second one. And arguably, in my opinion, the second one is better than the first, even better. And so I think that's what you're going to see here. I think that Nintendo had a bunch of content left over, even though Super Mario Odyssey was gigantic. I think it still had a lot of content left over, and I think what you're going to see is a lot of that content moved over to Super Mario Odyssey 2. Now, to be fair, there was some kind of DLC released for Super Mario Odyssey. It was kind of like, it wasn't great. Like, I think it was called Yoshi's something or other, and they hid, like, moons in some areas that you'd already gone through. It wasn't awesome, but technically it was post-launch DLC support. But I understand what you're saying. Like, you want new story-based DLC with new areas that open up. I get that. So I understand a little bit of the frustration. I think it's more frustrating that we haven't got another 3D Mario game, really. So it's been a long drought for 3D Mario, so I feel you. But I would not count, even on this next game, having a lot of post-launch support. That's just not what Nintendo does with its 3D Mario games. Okay, our next question comes from Gregor G. Recent studies have showed that people are getting worse at reading long text, even people who attend higher level educations like law school. If the trend continues, do you have any educated guesses what this might lead to? Any ideas on how to get people to read more? Do we need to read more? Gregor, there is nothing more important than, at least here in America, for Americans to read more. It is a disaster of a lack of information. People don't know what's going on anymore. Because the problem is, back in, I think it was 1987, when Ronald Reagan was president, there was this thing called the Fairness Doctrine, where if you had somebody on your TV program that expressed an opinion, you had to have somebody else on there to basically respond to that opinion. And in some cases, maybe state that's actually a lie and it's not true and give viewers the truth. Well, that was dissolved for no good reason. If you read the data and the information about that, again, if you read, you'll find that it was very flimsy for why that happened. And a lot of it was because one side was pushing really hard to take over talk radio in the United States. And the stations that were doing that did not want to have alternate viewpoints on their radio stations. One, because it might cost money, but two, because they just wanted their slant on the station. And so the Fairness Doctrine was completely wiped away. And when that happened, you get Fox News, where it's a network that just paid almost $1 billion for lying to its viewers about election fraud from 2020. And the crazy part is, people know, or maybe they don't know. That's the thing nobody reads. So if you watch Fox News, do you know they paid almost $1 billion? Because Fox isn't going to talk about it. You're going to have to watch some other news channel to find out that Fox lied to you and had to pay $1 billion for lying to you. So personally, I watched no TV news. None. I even have it like on my YouTube TV. I have the news channels removed from the listing because they're all trash. Because to me, the real problem is for-profit journalism. For-profit journalism isn't a big deal if you're like a gaming website or you're reviewing music and stuff like that. It's not that big a deal. It's when you get into politics that it becomes a problem, because then the news becomes a popularity contest, and it's not about getting to the truth and sharing the truth with viewers. It's about getting people on your air that makes people watch. And it doesn't matter if they're telling the truth, or if they're lying, or if they're great people, or if they're horrible people. If your eyeballs are attracted to the TV set, that's what's going to be on the television. We just saw this with the election in 2024. A lot of the more horrible things that one of the candidates was doing was not shown on national TV broadcasts, or any broadcast for that matter, because the TV networks needed the race to be close, so people kept watching. For-profit political journalism could be the end of our democracy. That's just the truth of it. So people need to read. And a big reason why reading makes a difference versus watching a television show is when you read something, it's very clearly labeled whether something is a news story or it's an opinion. If you go read any of the major papers, sure, you're going to find crazy stuff in there, but it's going to be very clearly labeled as opinion, meaning that's what this person thinks. This isn't necessarily the facts. Then you go to the news articles where they uphold a higher standard, where they actually care about reporting the truth. So I only read. I do not watch any news at all. One of the more interesting things, I think, after the election, if you look at the most popular Google searches, one of them was, did Biden drop out? The second one was, can I change my vote? The third one was Project 2025. So my mom lives in central Pennsylvania, and there's this thing you may have heard about. There's this network of TV networks called Sinclair. They own hundreds of local TV news stations, and they are basically slanted to one side, and they literally send scripts to their TV networks and tell their anchors to read these scripts verbatim. In fact, here's a clip of that happening right now.
Did the FBI have a personal vendetta in pursuing the Russia investigation of President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn?
Did the FBI have a personal vendetta in pursuing the Russia investigation of President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn?
Did the FBI have a personal vendetta
in pursuing the Russia investigation of
President Trump's former national security advisor,
Michael Flynn?
Did the FBI have a personal vendetta in pursuing the investigation?
It could very well be true.
That is some scary, dystopian stuff right there. And so when I went home and talked to my mom just a couple months ago, she had never even heard of Project 2025 because the news stations that she is watching is being protective of certain people to make sure people stay engaged with the election. So, man, everybody needs to read. Another problem is that you got people, because of these TV networks that use these scare tactics to freak people out, you have people who are barely able to pass a GED test, pulling their kids out of school to homeschool them. I mean, we're just seeing a degradation of the average intelligence of the average American, and it's sad. And if people started reading more, it would start going back up. Okay, our last question for this episode of Ask Shane Anything comes from Kevin. Can we get your final thoughts on PlayStation 5 Pro? Well, first of all, disclaimer, I still do not have one. I am putting it on my Amazon wish list, and I'm hoping that everyone in my family pitches in and they just get me the one gift and I get the PlayStation 5 Pro. However, Matt has one, and I have had a chance to kind of mess around with it and check it out and that sort of thing. So I don't know that owning it is going to affect my opinion all that much. But I guess what I would say, first of all, is it feels unnecessary. And I don't think PlayStation has tried to position it as something essential or necessary. I think its messaging has been correct. You know, it's said all along, like, hey, this is for the enthusiasts. This is for the people who want it. This is for the people who are tired of having to choose between performance and quality. Are there people out there who are tired of, like, moving the analog stick left or right and pressing a button? I don't know. It's tried to position it properly to the people I think who would probably want to buy it. But I think the big question is like, should people buy it? And I say no. Having looked at games running on PS5 Pro over at Matt's house, and obviously seeing all the footage and seeing all of Digital Foundry's analysis of the PS5 Pro, even in games where it does improve the visuals, I feel like I really have to squint. And this is somebody who's been doing this since like 1997, telling you that he has to squint to see the difference between the games. It's not as drastic, I don't believe, as the jump, let's say, from like Xbox One to Xbox One X or from PS4 to PS4 Pro. This jump is less, and I think significantly less and noticeably less. Then you start talking about the pricing. Like, to me, we're 4 years into the PlayStation 5 cycle. You should be able to build this slightly more powerful console for the same price that you were building the base PS5 4 years ago. The price should not have gone up, but PlayStation has increased the price of the base PS5 in Europe. It's increased the price of the DualSense controller everywhere. It can get away with it because it's got everybody by the balls. Michael Pachter just talked about this in a recent episode of Pachter Factor. So I feel like the PS5 Pro is a power move on PlayStation's part, but other than just the prestige of having the most powerful console, I struggle to understand why PlayStation has released this. I just have. Like, I don't understand why you create confusion among your consumers, why you would kind of split up your consumer base and have this one group that has this console that can do X, Y, and Z, and this other console that can only do RST. I don't understand the philosophy behind that, other than, again, the prestige of having the most powerful console on the market. So, to me, as we often say on Game Face, the PS5 Pro is a solution in search of a problem. There really isn't a problem. The PS5 is plenty powerful and great, and I feel like most developers haven't even tapped into the base PS5 yet. So I'm going to get it. I feel like as a journalist, someone evaluating games, I should have it. I think it's just comes part and parcel with the gig. Do I think you should buy it? No, I don't think anybody should buy it. I just think it's overpriced and it's not really worth it. Okay, that's it for this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything. Thanks to everybody who asked questions. Thanks to everybody who watches. Thanks to all our patrons who are pledging at patreon.com/SIFTD. Some of you guys are pledging at $7 or more per month at that Ask Shane tier, and that is why this show happens. If you're watching this show on YouTube, it would really be awesome if you could find it in your heart to support us during the holiday season. Head over to patreon.com/sifted or give us a pledge, or you can go to donate.sifted.net and you can punch in any amount you want to give us there. We take any credit card, we take PayPal in over 180 countries. Way more countries than you can play PlayStation's PC games in. So thanks for everybody for any kind of support that you give us. Even if you just like this show and leave a comment, that's cool as well. Thanks to everybody for anything you do to help me or Sifted. We'll see you next week.